Hey guys, it's Shay here with another review video. This episode has all the elements of a solid Ordeal chapter and has perfect build up. But before we get into it, I'd like to ask if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share it with others. Without further ado, on to the vid. The episode begins in Trinidad with the Greyhounds, with the target being Outpost number 65 and their head of command being Inspector Brandon Gale, who then asks if Lewis and Tevin are ready and tells them to lead the way. He then says that all governments have agreed to assist Code, including the Trinidadian government, due to Project Armageddon being in effect, and that per Aldrich Ross, the Greyhounds have been assigned Outpost 65, which is an oil rig off the coast of Venezuela. And though it is closer to their border than it is to Trinidad's, their authorities have still requested aid. He says the rig is now a point of trade between different groups associated with Thanatos. Thus, items aboard that vessel are now classified property of Code, and they must not be damaged. He says an F-35 would easily eliminate the target, but they must be stealthier, and that they will move in by boat, also adding that all occupants are hostiles and are to be executed on site, and to remember that everyone who isn't on their side is a servant of Thanatos, whose ultimate goal is the eradication of humankind, and he will be damned if he allows that to happen, as we see all of them beginning to move out. We then see boats moving along the north coast of the Venezuelan territory. Evan looks at his phone, which has a picture of him and his girlfriend on it. Brandon then says he has been loaded with impossible responsibilities, and thanks Lewis and Tevin for lending a hand, as he can always use their support. He also says that the inspector role isn't as glamorous on him as it was on Ian, but Tevin says he's selling himself short, and that he's doing great. Lewis then says he grew up reading about the Great War and about how many of his family members died on the battlefield, only to be plunged into it himself. But he says it doesn't bother him, as being the leader of his family, he's always been prepared for war. But he can't say the same for others, as they are not ready for this. He then asks Brandon if Yukiko and Azam were safe, as he's never been separated from both of them at the same time. Brandon responds that he understands his concerns, and so does Chairman Ross, as they have been given a far simpler task than them. He adds that there was a power outage in central Trinidad that was potentially tight in cost, and that they will be a part of the investigation team. He says he believes the only reason Azam agreed to a mission far below his level is because he wouldn't say no to being tasked with the responsibility of looking after the newest addition to the Wolfpack. He finishes by saying they may be far beyond Lewis's sight, but they are just as far away from danger itself, and that he should take solace in that. The scene then changes to central Trinidad with Investigation Team Alpha. Lieutenant Anderson in the middle says if he is not mistaken, it will be Yukiko's very first mission, and asks if they are honored to be alongside such a mighty warrior on her debut mission. Yukiko says yes sir, and that it is a privilege to be protected by her, the Snow Rabbit, which she confused for her actual title of Snow Leopard. She then looks to Azam and asks if with her whopping 2 hours of field experience so far, she'll be mighty helpful, right? And Azam responds that they are more than lucky to have her, and says not to underestimate herself, and that it is truly their honor to watch her grow. He then reminds her it is a simple mission, but to keep her guard up, as the confidence a soldier gains is determined by how many flawless missions they execute. Lieutenant Anderson then says Investigation Team Beta reported they located the source of the power outage, and that they'll be working to have everything back up and running quickly, and that just leaves them, as they have civilians to locate. He says after the outage they received several distress calls, and he presumes some patrons were unable to evacuate, being trapped by an electric exit or something, adding that there are a few businesses around the corner and they should start the search with them. As they make their way past the market, they spot civilians, and Lieutenant Anderson calls in that they have found the source of the distress signals. They then make their way inside with the lieutenant asking to please ensure everyone is inside of him and his partners, with Azam telling Yukiko to keep watch outside with him, and notes that the door was locked from the inside. The lieutenant greets the man and asks if he can give him a head count and if any are injured, with a man named William saying there are 8 adults and 3 children with no one being injured. The lieutenant says he and his team will escort them out. The girl next to William begins to cry. Private Khalifa squats down and tries to reassure the girl, telling her there's no need to cry and that there's nothing to fear, but the girl simply points upward. This causes Khalifa to look back, with William saying they weren't trapped because they cannot leave, but that all 3 of the children say they see something watching them from outside, adding that the adults can only feel it and that he can't confirm seeing it himself, but it's like something horrifying is stalking them. And at first he thought it was targeting the children, but he now understands that they are the only cameos there. This news causes Yukiko to turn around and question if a Kimyo is present, with Azam already looking upward as a shadow-veiled Kimyo is shown. Azam then says internally that he felt hostile chi, but not this close, and wonders if the Kimyo was always there or if he just arrived. He then tells the troops to secure the door and protect the civilians, as the Kimyo has been waiting for them. Private Johan and Lieutenant Anderson are then seen barricading the door, with the lieutenant wondering how an enemy Kimyo is here when they did a scan. but the private tells him to focus as he has civilians to get home. Private Khalifa then calls in that Azam and Yukiko have eyes on the hostile. Yukiko gets into her stance and asks Azam if they are really about to fight, and Azam confirms they are, as he says he feels hostile chi, though it isn't emanating from him, so she should be on guard. As the cameo drops down and smirks, Azam continues to speak, saying that the chi he does feel has been steadily rising since they first laid eyes on him, and what concerns him is that that chi is greater than his own. The enemy Kimyo says he was starting to think no one would show up, and that he'd end up eating the people inside without a fight. After hearing him speak, Yukiko is shocked and notes that his voice is absolutely horrifying. But Azam tells her not to be afraid and that they'll be on their way shortly. The Kimyo then notes what Azam called Yukiko and asks if that is her full name or if it is short for something. Yukiko attempts to answer but is stopped by Azam, who tells the Kimyo if he directly addresses her in front of him again, he will decapitate him. But the Kimyo now known as Ephialtes says there's nothing wrong with sharing names, and asks what his is. Azam says nothing, but grabs one of his blades. The lack of response angers Ephialtes as he demands they tell him their names, and in response, Azam activates Kidding while Yukiko readies her sword. Ephialtes then says this is a waste of time, as it always goes much easier when they comply. He then says a name is the freest thing a mortal can give, yet they hold on to it often, adding that it costs them nothing to give, and as he takes off the paper, he reveals his eye, and continues the prior sentence by saying, but it costs him almost everything to take. He then says Azam and Yukiko's full names, as well as their ages and talents, and as a menacing shadowy visage emanates off of him, he says humans should value their names more. After all, it's the only thing to stand watch over a buried corpse. Now, onto the highlights. The first thing I wanted to mention is, do y'all think the little girl could be a Hemlock? I'm only asking because when I reread the chapter to make the script, I noticed how red her hair was, and that she had blue eyes. You can tell William, who I'm assuming is her father, also has blue eyes, but no red hair. So I'm assuming he isn't, nor do either of them have the hairstyle that usually comes with Hemlocks. We've only seen 3 other Hemlocks, with 2 of the 3 appearing in the first season only. So it'd be kinda nice if this girl was one to show other Hemlocks lived in Trinidad, but it'd be even better if we got some more Hemlock lore overall, as Lewis in this very episode says his family fought in the Great War, which would make sense, and we can assume other clans and families did as well. But aside from the knowledge of what a Hemlock usually looks like, and the nature of their family talent in the form of Ash of the Fathers, we don't know as much about them as we do the Heart Clan, who got a lore dump in the very first episode this season, as well as many relative characters to back up their lore-related strength. But all the Hemlocks have is Lewis, which makes sense considering how his talent works. He's the head of his family, and we haven't seen how he operates in that position at all, or really interact with his own family outside of Elon's death. Next, I want to talk about the older brother dynamic Lewis has and how it relates to Azam and Yukiko. So first, Lewis says he hasn't been away from either Azam or Yukiko, which we know is true as he was with Azam in Trinidad all last season, and during the 8-month time skip, he was with Yukiko. And considering he is the oldest of the cubs, it's understandable why he seeks the youngest member's protection. He acts as a sort of mentor figure to both of them. With Azam, this is shown more with their fight against Cass, as Lewis is the one guiding and instructing him throughout that fight, and with Yukiko, he is a literal mentor to her alongside Tevin during the time skip, helping cultivate her use of Hisame. I think the dynamic of Lewis sort of guiding Azam that we saw in the first season, as well as his desire to protect the youngest amongst the cubs, is being placed more on Azam. But now, of course, with Yukiko. As even Brandon admits, Azam wouldn't deny a mission where he has the responsibility of protecting Yukiko. We also see the same sort of guiding Lewis did with Azam against Cass, but with Azam and Yukiko, as Azam during this episode reassures her multiple times. I really enjoy this shared dynamic between the characters, and I think it really highlights how far Azam himself has come in terms of experience, with him being able to keep a level head during the situation, unlike his initial moments with Cass, further mirroring Lewis in that manner. The second to last thing I want to talk about is Yukiko herself. Upon my reread of the chapter for the review, I noticed that she had both of her father's blades. It's kind of funny because when I saw this, it reminded me of Zoro from One Piece, but of course I don't expect her to use all 3 blades at the same time. However, this does make me wonder how she will incorporate the other swords into her fighting style. I imagine her initial sword won't be breaking anytime soon, but if it did, that would give her cause to use her father's black sword. We know the sword with the white hilt is reserved for Hisame to use when he decides to manifest himself, so I see it as a possibility he could make an appearance during this fight, but if he doesn't, I imagine we'll see him later on in another more serious fight. I'm also wondering how Yukiko will use Hisame to assist Azam during this fight. I'm overall pretty excited to see Yukiko's first serious showcasing of her use of Hisame, and how it will differ from Sabito's use. And lastly, let's talk about Ephialtes. Now his name does have historical relevance, as it is the name of a Greek renegade during the Greco-Persian Wars, who betrayed his homeland by revealing the existence of a path around the Greek coalition's position at Thermopylae. Now I have no clue how accurate that is, so be sure to correct me in the comments. I also can't be too sure if any of that will play into how his character's talent works, but speaking of his talent, two things are relatively clear here. The first being the most obvious, as one of the abilities of the talent lets the user identify their opponent. This is clear when he is able to say Azam and Yukiko's name as well as their ages and talents, without knowing any of that information prior. The second thing is that the eye that was revealed may be the actual talent itself, and more so controls the cameo like a parasite. This idea comes from the fact that Azam says the hostile chi he feels isn't emanating from the cameo itself, but is clearly present, as well as a text bubble placement after the eye is revealed, suggesting the eye itself is the origin of the speech in a manner of speaking, and not the cameo. Now, this episode felt just as complete as the last one did, so even if you consider it short, it's not really missing anything in my opinion. I enjoyed how Yukiko's lack of experience helped further enhance the intensity of the situation, along with the natural hostile chi that Azam said he was picking up. Based on the preview pics of the next few episodes, it seems like we're going to be focusing more on this fight as well as the one involving Shay and Andrea, but I'm wondering when we'll see Lewis and Tevin's mission be highlighted. Also, I'm super glad Azam is going to get a chance to show off kidding so soon, and I'm pretty excited to see how he'll be using his weapon. But anyway, that's the video guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned in the highlight section. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well, and I will see y'all in the next one.